This is season 2 of The Sweater with Kathleen Dames. Over the course of our 12-week season, we will knit the pearly pullover together. Hello, my friends, and thank you for being here. Today is season 2, episode 4, and we are going to be casting on the body. And I hope you're excited. I'm excited because this is like the real meat of sweater knitting, right? We've cast on a sleeve, we've knitted a sleeve. We have a sleeve, I even turned it inside out for you so you could see it. And Jane, you can hold my needle and I will show you my sleeve. It's all done. I haven't blocked it yet because I know my gauge, but you should block your sleeve. That way you will know for real, for sure, what gauge you're getting and if you're gonna be casting on the right number of stitches and if you're gonna be happy with your final sweater. So that's sleeve 1, and I turned it inside out so you can see this lovely ribbing. And you may have wondered, why is she having me purl through the back loops every once in a while? What's that all about? And it makes this beautiful twisted stitch rib. And I really think that's a nice detail. So we'll get to that again for the body in a few minutes, but we need to cast on. And I have found that when I have to cast on a lot of stitches, even when I have to cast on only a few stitches, I really like doing what I call the two-tail, long tail cast on. And two tails, so I have two tails. Today I'm working from 2 skeins of yarn, but you could also do it from the inside and the outside of a single skein of yarn. The thing is, the reason I'm doing 2 skeins is because I'm going to be alternating skeins to blend the color, because this is a hand-dyed yarn. My friend Reen at Happy Fuzzy Yarn dyed it for me and it's beautiful. And I don't know if you can even see here, one tail is lighter than the other right now. And they go back and forth, they alternate. And I want them to blend nicely. And I alternated skeins here on the sleeve. And I have a tip for you on that in a moment. But first, let's start casting on. So you've got your 2 tails and you're going to make a slip knot with both of them. And then you're going to get your needle from Jane or wherever your needle is. And you're going to put that slip knot on the needle. The slip knot does not count. It does not count. We're going to take it off at the end because it's got both strands together. So then we've got 2 strands of yarn. So we're ready to do the slingshot long tail cast on. I really prefer a long tail cast on. I think it gives a nice, not too firm, not too loose edge. It also, of course, if you look at it closely, it's actually the cast on plus the first row of knitting. But what I like is that it's a nice, flexible but firm edge. So you can also use this for a provisional cast on, which is how I first used it. And then I'd use one of the strands would be waste yarn. And you'd make sure that that's the one that goes along the bottom of the needle. But today it doesn't really matter which tail is which. We're just going to be going back and forth, using them both, and they become the yarn that goes over the needle and the yarn that goes under the needle. So I have to cast on, I think it's 198 stitches. So I have a lot of casting on to do. So I'm going to talk to you while I'm casting on, and I'm not going to count because I can't talk and count and cast on. So we'll just keep going on here. And the thing about the 2-tail long tail cast on, in addition to having both yarns together, which is really, well, there are 2 reasons why I like the 2-tail long tail cast on for this. First of all, you never have to worry about running out of yarn. You know, when you're doing a regular long tail cast on, you sort of hold it out or you measure it carefully and you think, okay, I've allowed 1 inch per stitch or whatever. And then you get to the end and you've got this much, or you have 10 more stitches to cast on, or you have a really long tail. And then on the next row, you knit with the tail instead of the working yarn. Well, that's all eliminated with the 2-tail long tail cast on, because you have as much yarn you can cast on until you've used up your entire skeins of yarn if you wanted to. And the other great thing is that, of course, your both tails of yarn from your 2 skeins are ready to go. And so we can start alternating right away. Or, you know, if you aren't going to alternate, you can still do a two-tail long-tail cast on and just break one of the yarns. Because when you're casting on a lot of stitches, it's a lot of stitches. It's a big commitment. It's hard to find the right length for if you're just doing a straight long tail. And I hate wasting yarn at the end if you have too long a tail, or I hate casting on all over again. I can't tell you the number of times I have cast on for a sweater only to discover that I have to do it all over again because I didn't allow enough tail yarn. So this way we have two tails. We don't have to worry about it. And we'll be all set to alternate skeins right away, which we're going to want to do if you're using a variegated yarn, a hand-dyed yarn, or even if you're going to do stripes. It's great to have both those tails ready to go. And one of the things I learned recently about alternating skeins is to not twist the tails together. And I think I must have learned about sort of alternating when I was knitting something with stripes in the round. And so for that, I had to carry the contrast color up and twist the tails or the working yarns together as I went up to make sure that the striped yarn, the contrast yarn, was going to be ready for the next stripe. And so since then I've always sort of twisted those yarns together, and it makes it nice and secure. But I don't know if you can see on Jane, I would twist them together on the inside, and of course then we're wearing this inside out, and so I have this little line, and I don't mind it. It's kind of like a seam, but it is there, and it's not there on the other side. So out of the blue, I read something the other day that recommended just letting go of the yarn you've been knitting with and picking up the other yarn, not worrying about twisting them around each other. And so I tried it on the sleeve, and it totally works. I don't have any holes. I don't have that line of twisted stitches, and this should all block out when I have a chance to block this. And I think it's really the perfect solution to what I saw as this problem. And I was going to have you twist them around each other on the knit side, and I didn't think that was so great either. What I love now is this will be a completely reversible sweater. You can wear it knit side out, you can wear it purl side out. It'll just, it'll all work, and it won't be noticeable at all. So those are my big tips for you today. To use the two-tail long tail cast on, and I think I did show that in season 1. I'll be sure to call that out in the show notes, so you can go back and check that episode of season 1. I did a nice close-up where you can really see how to do it. But basically, you're just going to make that slingshot with the yarns and use the 2 different strands of yarn for the 2 sides of the slingshot. And you just do your basic long tail cast on, but with 2 tails. And so you have that, and then to not twist the yarns together when you change. I changed every round on the sleeve, and I'll do that on the body too. Just because I'm working in the round, then I don't have to worry about any strands going up the side. It's the easiest thing to do. If you are doing if you're doing stripes or something, you may want to consider twisting those yarns together, but then be sure to do them on the side that will be the inside of your work. And I didn't tighten up my needle tight enough. I'm using an interchangeable set, and it's come just a little bit untwisted, so I have to twist that together before I can keep going. So what else can I tell you about alternating skeins? I think I recommend alternating skeins because it blends the colors together. If you're using hand-dyed yarn, you just can never be certain about. There isn't even a dye lot usually. That's the thing. And you want to blend them together. I have a sweater where one skein was quite a bit different than the other 3 skeins in the sweater. And I didn't realize it until it was all knit up, and that skein was in the yoke. And that was disappointing. I ended up pulling it back out, the yoke and the sleeves, and re-knitting them to blend that sort of different skein in. I don't want you to have to do that. So if you do the blending right from the beginning, then you won't have to worry about it, and you'll have a nice cohesive fabric color-wise. And also, if you've fallen for a variegated yarn, that's a good way to break up any flashing and pooling, is to sort of offset where those colors start and end by using the two skeins together. Okay, that's a lot of stitches. But I still have not run out of yarn, and I don't have to worry about that. So I think this is the best solution. Okay, so let's make sure. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Oh man, I should have been counting all along, but then I couldn't have been talking to you. The other thing to think about is that we are going to be working this in the round. And you know, if you've worked in the round, you know that there are always those instructions like cast on blah, blah, blah stitches, join for working in the round, be careful not to twist. And it's for good reason, because if you twist it and some of your stitches are outside and some are inside, you're going to incorporate that twist into the whole tube, and it's just going to be a disaster. Now, you can fix it if you find that you've twisted the stitches on the first row. But first of all, let's try not to twist them. So that means when you have all of your stitches on, just spend a moment looking at your cable and making sure that the whole cast on edge is facing the inside. And mine is. So then we'll join for knitting in the round, and we won't have to worry about it. If you've checked and somehow something got twisted, when you get to the end of the first round, you can untwist it a little and just bring the needle to put that twist out. And I don't have enough stitches yet. But if you don't discover it until a few rounds later, then you're kind of in trouble. So another possibility is to work the ribbing flat. And it is a ribbing. It's a 5x1 ribbing, so it's not a ribbing that's going to contract any. It's going to do just enough to keep it from really curling those contrast stitches there. When we're knitting them, they are the purl stitches, and we purl through the back, and that's going to make that lovely twisted stitch. But of course, when we're wearing them, it becomes a knitted rib. Okay, I'm getting there. But you could work the ribbing flat. Work it back and forth on your circular needle, and then when it's time to start just your straight stockinette portion, you could then join it to work in the round and place the marker, then join it, and you won't be able to twist it because you'll have this piece of fabric, and it's pretty easy to make sure that that piece of fabric is all hanging in the same direction from the needle. And then you'll just have one little seam to sew up. And that, I do that a lot, especially if the edging of my sweater is garter stitch, because who wants to knit garter stitch in the round? It's not my favorite thing to do. I'd rather just knit back and forth, and then when I'm ready, join them together and knit around and around and sew up a little seam. So you certainly can do that if that will help you. If you're worried about joining and not twisting, I definitely recommend doing that. So one thing to note, if you are going to work the ribbing back and forth down at the bottom, you want to make sure that you're doing it correctly. In the pattern, because we're working in the round, I tell you to knit 5, purl 1 through the back. But if you're going back and forth, then you need to know what to do on the other side. So on the way back, you will purl 5 and knit 1 through the back. And you'll just do those back and forth. But make sure that they line up, so you'll knit the knits and purl the purls, or do it through the back loops. But you want to make sure that if you're going back and forth, that you don't follow the exact directions in the pattern, because that's designed for knitting in the round. So feel free to ask more about that if it's not clear. But of course, when we're working back and forth, it's different than working in the round. So, okay, so let's join our stitches to work in the round. Now, what I meant by making sure that the stitches are all facing the same way is that the line along the bottom should all, what I like to do is get everything facing inwards towards the center of the circle. because that's what we're doing. We're making a circle. So here, I'm going to shift everything so that all of the cast on edge is on the inside of this giant tube. Okay. Now, the next thing we want to do is make sure we've got our stitches all ready to go here. And the last thing we need to do before we actually join is slip that slip knot off the needle and just undo it. And then you've got two tails, and that's the only downside, is that you have an extra tail to weave in, but I think it's worth it. So here we go, and now I have these two tails, remember, ready to go, the working yarn. I'm going to just ignore one of them and use the other. I'm actually turned around. Sorry about that. Okay, so here we go. And now I'm ready to begin. And I'm just going to ignore, of course I'm going to ignore those ends, but I'm going to ignore one of the working yarns, and that's just hanging down here. And I'm just going to begin knitting. So 1, 2, 3. And the first round is a little stiff. 4, 5, and now we're ready to knit through the back, purl through the back loop, and we're going to twist that stitch. And we'll just keep going. And you'll notice that I didn't place a marker here at the beginning. I figure I'll know when I get to it. And in fact, I won't really need to place a marker at all unless I wanted a row counter, because I'm always going to be switching yarns here, so I'll always know when I've come to the beginning of the next round. Now, if you are going to work the hem back and forth, which is a great idea if you're really worried about twisting, on the way back you will simply knit those stitches through the back loop and then purl 6 stitches. So you want to make sure that we maintain that stockinette stitch fabric and our ribbing. And then of course you go back and forth if you're working that backwards, back and forth. Of course you're going back and forth if you're working it back and forth. All right, so we are on the last repeat here of our ribbing. And it's going to be time to change skeins. And now we do our purl one through the back loop, bring the yarn to the back of the work. I like to take this opportunity to snug up my the ends. And now, okay, this is the yarn I've been working with. And here's the yarn I want to work with now. I'm not going to twist them together. I'm just going to let go of this one and pick up this one. And start, and I'll do a little continental just to practice. I'm not doing a very good job of the continental because it's not tensioned, but there we go. This yarn will be waiting for us, and this is my working yarn, and this will just be hanging out until we get back around to it. But really just let go of this one and pick up this one. Don't twist them together, and you will be just fine. Of course, if you're working back and forth, you still probably should try to alternate skeins if you can. But then you do it every 2 rows. So once you have cast on the correct number of stitches and done your twisted rib, then you're going to be just working in the round. Whether you already joined in the round or you're going to join into the round at that point. And then you're just going to knit it around and around. We don't have any waist shaping in this sweater. If you want it, you can certainly add it. You are the boss of your knitting. You could either do it as sort of princess seams front and back. You could do it at the side. You could do like the solstice cardi. You could do the decreases at sort of princess points and then do the increases in the front if you want it to be a more shapely sweater. But I designed it originally as your really favorite fancy sweatshirt. So I don't have any waist shaping in there. So you're just going to be knitting a tube up to the underarm point, and it will be the same, will not be the same length as your sleeve. We have longer sleeves on this and a shorter body, unless again you want to change it, and of course you can do that. So before we go, I just want to give a quick little shout out to my dad. Happy birthday, Dad. Today, if you're watching this, the day it goes live, it's my dad's birthday. And in honor of that, I am wearing the dentist tie that I designed and knit for him a few years ago. You can find this pattern in my Ravelry shop. The great thing about it is a fully fashioned proper tie. Like, it's a tube, and the men's version has a little keeper on the back and is a little bit longer. I wear mine kind of short because that's my style. But it's a proper tube. It's got this great spot stitch pattern stockinette on the back, and a ridge of purl to keep it folded nice and flat. And then when you come up to the top, there's some shaping, and then we switch to a knit one, purl one rib for the tail. That makes it thinner. It makes it easier to tie it without having a lot of bulk up here. So happy birthday, Dad. Thanks for inspiring me to design the dentist tie. And I hope you have a great day. Love ya. So I think that's everything we've got going on today. If you have any questions, be sure to ask them in the Ravelry forum. Otherwise, I will be back next week. Thank you so much for joining me, and happy knitting. Bye. This is season 2 of The Sweater with Kathleen Dames. Over the course of our 12-week season, we will knit the Pearly Pullover together. Many thanks to Reen at Happy Fuzzy Yarns, Corinna at Picnic Knits, Tara Swiger and my fellow Starship captains, and you for being a part of The Sweater with Kathleen Dames. Don't forget to visit KathleenDames.com/thesweater to sign up for the newsletter before July 22nd to receive your free copy of the Pearly Pullover in your welcome email. Is it after July 22nd? Just not a joiner? Purchase your copy of the Pearly Pullover from my Ravelry shop anytime. Be sure to share your progress on social media with the hashtags Pearly Pullover and KD Sweater. Questions? Comments? Visit the Kathleen Dames Design for Ravelry forum today. Thanks so much for joining me, and happy knitting!